Nice little countdown. All right, we're showing up live for YouTube. There's LinkedIn. Okay.
Nice.
Stream health. Oh, this is interesting. Okay. Go live. We are live with YouTube. Okay. Good. Now we have a couple minutes here for LinkedIn, and then we'll let everyone join us.
Okay. And so, in terms of format, I guess, is it just kind of conversational, similar to what we did on the podcast, John, or were there key topics or key questions to ask me? Just because I liked how we did the podcast, so I didn't know if it was kind of a very similar thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We're gonna keep it organic
Okay.
and go through. We're just gonna introduce folks to another month of the webinar series, and then we're just gonna get right into it and talking about the different stages of interviewing. Which interview are you prepping for? Where are you at in your career transition? And just kind of keep running with the conversation, and then we'll open it up if there's any Q&A or anything in folks that are joining. So
Okay. Got it.
good there. Okay. There's some latency.
Yeah, I noticed that, but it doesn't, it caught up on my end.
Okay. You're on LinkedIn.
No, I was just watching you. Even here, there was latency.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was wondering if there was.
But I am on LinkedIn. Let's see.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I was just checking if my volume was coming through here
Hmm.
because I didn't want to hear feedback. Okay. I wonder if we just allow people to join here in a minute. Okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna hit it.
All
Go.
right.
All
There it
right. All right, we are in. And we're gonna give everyone about
is.
another 30 seconds or so to join us here, and then we're gonna get started doing some introductions. And it's exciting to continue this webinar series that we've been doing, Julie, and bringing it to LinkedIn Live. So it's, instead of just having the small groups, more intimate groups, we wanted to bring it to a bigger audience and start bringing on guests, like to open up the conversation to different areas of expertise because, right, Julia and I don't have all the answers. But now Julia, on the other hand, she's got more.
Maybe a few extra.
That's all you need.
Right, right. Exactly. Okay. Now we're right on time.
Okay.
So we'll let folks continue to join us, and we'll just get started with the conversation because we're going to share the recording with folks after this. So if folks are tuning into the recording right now, they're going to get some gold from our guest and join this organic conversation, right? Julie and I started this series, right? This career development webinar series, because we saw a lot of need for it from folks within our network, from clients that we have, and folks that were navigating major layoffs, other career transitions that were more voluntary. So we were like, let's just open up a conversation
Mhm.
and start bringing in people that want to join a conversation like this and give back to our network and give back to the folks that are in need right now, point them in the direction of some of these resources, and really just allow people to feel seen in their job search right now. So that's what you're joining. If you're just joining us here or
Yeah.
listening to the recording, welcome. My name's John. I'm a conscious leadership and executive coach. So I've been coaching full time for about 3 years now. Previously in sales and business development in the energy industry, and it's been quite a journey working as a coach. I did a lot of career coaching in the beginning, and now have been doing more leadership and executive coaching, and I like to call it, instead of that, more like life coaching for executives. It goes into a whole bunch of different areas. So, along with coaching, I've been leading workshops and other training and development programs, as well as still teaching yoga and meditation every week. A big part of what I do and who I am. And I want to also give Julie a moment to introduce herself. And then we're going to hand it off to Julia to do the big introduction. So, Julie, take a moment, let the folks know who you are.
Thanks, John. I am
Mhm.
Julie Johnston, and my background is so deep. I don't always like to get too into my past. It's more about what I'm doing now that's important to me and for all of you. But I did leave a career as vice president of people, which had an HR angle to it and a coaching angle to it. I left it early pandemic to follow my heart and my passion, and that's working as a coach, as a mentor, as a leadership development partner, and started a company. And so I come to Humessence with a passion for helping people find their abilities and their strengths and their paths ahead, to see things clearly, to gain perspective on their current situation and what their potential is. I run a program called the Game Changers, which is specific for rising leaders. And so for managers out there that have a young superstar that you're just not ready to promote, they need a little extra coaching to get them ready for what lies ahead. That's my job. I come in and I really prepare them for great leadership in the future. But being a part of Humessence and being a part of this panel is about community to me, and community and people is my number one passion. And just pouring into one another, I think, is what we all kind of need and deserve right now. So I'm honored to be a part of this group that really cares about you listeners, and giving as much as we can from our past experiences to help you on your journey. So I'm here and happy to
Mhm.
lend whatever advice and pearls of wisdom I can.
Thanks, Julie. And Julia is an employment expert and career coach who's passionate about transforming workplace dynamics. Now, she has a plethora of experiences, and I'm super excited to get to share her with you all. So, welcome, Julia. Thanks for joining us this evening. And please expand on your introduction a lot more. That was very shallow compared to all of the depth that you've been into in your career. So please share with the folks joining today.
Well, thank you so much, John and Julie, for having me. I'm excited to be here. This topic is one that I'm passionate about. But just to share a little bit more about me, I'm the CEO of Rock Career Development, and you hear that I'm a career coach and employment expert. I've been a career coach now for almost 20 years, and I'm focused on helping employees to find their fulfillment, whether it's through career transitions or stepping into leadership, and then helping organizations to transform their workplaces and making sure that we're improving workplace dynamics, especially in a post-pandemic world. I've actually co-authored two books that have helped athletes to find their success and from a career transition standpoint. So, the Six-Figure Athlete and Athlete to Entrepreneur Volume 2. And I'm just someone who loves helping people to find their thing in the career space. So,
Love it.
Wow. No, I loved the I remember when you that idea, that transition came up for you of thinking, I want to support athletes transitioning into the employment space. And I thought that was so interesting the way that you connected that to your passion and,
yes.
stepped into that stepped into that work, and that could be a whole other episode. I don't know if
Yeah,
I don't know if
definitely.
we need to go there right now. But back to interview strategy and preparation. Now, when you think of where people are at in the interview process, so we'll start right from the beginning, and you have been searching. You've just landed a couple. Doors have just started to crack open,
Hmm.
right? So you have a couple screening interviews coming up, maybe one screening interview coming up. So, Julia, what would you say would be the best thing to do in preparing for your first and opening interview with an organization?
So the first thing I would say is treat every contact with that organization as a real interview. Sometimes when it comes to phone screens, people feel like, well, maybe it's just a phone call. We're just exploring, and maybe I don't have to fully be on my A game. I'm going to prep for the real thing. But you never know where that call will lead. So it's so important for you to prep for that interview as if it's the real thing. In addition to that, it's important to do as much research as possible prior to even getting to that phone screen, because again, you don't know who's going to be on the other end screening you. And this goes beyond just kind of doing the Google on their website, right? It's also about what's happening in your industry. What are the current events? Where has this organization found themselves in the industry from a competitive standpoint? What are the trends that are changing? All of these things are so important to know even before you get to the phone screen, because yes, they may ask you a few questions, but you never know what they're going to throw in there. And then you have to be prepared to answer. And then the last thing I'll also say is really work on building your confidence. The reason for that is sometimes the phone screens can be a little bit less intense. And so if you've started to build your confidence through those conversations, by the time you get to, whether it's multiple round of interviews or maybe hiring manager, you've already got a little bit of a, what do I call it, swag, and ready to really have a more robust and confident conversation with the interviewer.
Mm, wow, that's I mean that was so comprehensive, and just from like, digging in a little bit more to the research side of things.
Mhm.
Now, I always find, and again, like you mentioned, treating every conversation is sometimes I find, some clients having success reaching out to someone else in the company. Like if it's someone connected to their network or someone like reaching out to someone through LinkedIn who might be in the position that you're interested in or working with the group that you're interested in, to have the conversation even before that. What do you say about reaching out to folks within the organization before the interviews as well? Is that too soon, or is that something that goes with applying? What do you think?
So from my perspective, and John, you know this, how much I love LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn is like my platform. Like that's the hill I'm going to die on every time. So if you have an opportunity to connect with people at the organization, one, because it helps you in advance of the phone screen, but also it kind of gives you the skinny on the organization beyond what you're going to see on the company website, right? So I'm
Mhm.
all in favor of reaching out to whoever you can, and you can say, I'm excited, I've got a phone screen coming up, and I would love to just chat with you for a few minutes, 10 or 15 minutes if you can spare, just so I can learn more about your experience and in the company. And people love to talk about themselves, so that's just an opportunity for anyone to kind of toot their own horn for a few minutes. So highly recommend, leveraging your network. Ask for an introduction. If you have someone in your network that knows someone at the company, don't be afraid to ask for. When it comes to your career, you can't have any shame about, I don't want to ask for help. This is the time for you to get the help that you need.
And Julia, I totally agree. LinkedIn is my jam, but I think it's
Same.
important to separate that. Yes, go out and connect with those people on LinkedIn, but the Facebook and the Instagram, to me, are off limits. That crosses a line, in my opinion. And you don't start to like cyber stalk your interviewer or the person that, because I sit on the
Mhm.
interviewer side a lot, like you. And when I feel like people are encroaching, and I'm like, you're not getting the job and I don't want you to be in my personal life. So keep it professional. I think that's my first, and that goes along with what you're saying. The LinkedIn is, yes, a general place to stay connected, but don't cross any boundaries because that can be read as being creepy.
Absolutely, because remember, the idea is that you may work alongside these people. So if they think that you're a stalker or a creepster, they're less likely to say, "Do I want you to be sitting at the desk next to me?" Next thing you know, you're peeking over the wall when I'm not looking, and that kind of thing. So you don't want to send the wrong message before you even get in the door.
Yes, agree.
That's for sure. Now, we talked a little bit about the research side, connecting with folks within the organization, taking things beyond Google. Now, I love when you said that, and going a little bit deeper into beyond Google. What types of is there a specific type of report or specific place where you would go to for information like that? What does beyond Google essentially mean for people?
So from my perspective, it's
Mhm.
easy to go and say, so let's say we work for johnmarshall.com, right? And so it's easy to go to johnmarshall.com and say, okay, what do we know about John Marshall? Right. But the question is, are there for the industry that you're in, are there
Mhm.
reports about the industry where you can see where this company is slated, especially if it's publicly traded or anything like that? Where can you find more information? So thinking about whether it's the Yahoos, it's the Bloombergs, it's the other places where you can
Mhm.
find some of these reports, and then also leveraging tools like whether it's Glassdoor, where they have some forums on there where it's not just talking about salary and cost of living, but also being able to hear kind of some of the fodder that's coming out from people who've actually worked in that organization, and
Mhm.
then talking potentially to past employees, so not even just folks who work there now, but are there people who have worked there, maybe they've transitioned, and maybe they've had a similar career path to where what you want to do, and they started at John Marshall and then they moved on to someplace else, really starting up some of those conversations to figure out what value they found in their experience at that company, and then decided to transition out. So you just don't want to be stuck on that first line of Google, and the company
Mhm.
website, but what's happening in the industry? Where have they been in the news before? Right? Has something happened?
Mhm.
Have they made any sort of announcements? Are they laying off people? Right? I mean, knowing this environment that we're
Yep.
in, getting more context beyond the John Marshall does this, it makes airplanes, right? And we have really good values, right? The things that you found on the first
Mhm.
or second line of Google.
And
Mhm.
Julia, I think it's also to your point, when you get that research in your pocket, have some really insightful questions prepared to show that you've done that research. So you're always going to be asked, you should always be asked, do you have any questions for us? Make sure you have questions prepared and make sure, as Julia said, it shows you've done your research about where they are in the marketplace or where they are in their 5 year out. I also want to add the value, in my opinion, to the website. If you dig deep, you go into the page about the people and the values. Read about
Mhm.
their values.
For
What do they want the general public to know they believe in? And make sure that aligns with what you believe in. Because if it doesn't, you're wasting everybody's time. So that's a good area from the website perspective to kind of say, hey, I noticed one of your values is teamwork. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you cultivate that, or leadership development? Have a question tied to values. That always shows that you're in line with what they're thinking.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So I feel like the company website is the first place to start, right? And to at least kind of scene set, but don't stop there. But it's so huge from a value standpoint, because sometimes people get into this organization, and John and I had a conversation about disengagement and burnout and other things previously. And part of that may come from being in an organization where your values don't align, where the culture
Mhm.
doesn't align with what you're looking for, and so you're wondering why you're feeling this unrest or this angst or not feeling comfortable in the environment, and it's because you're in a place that truly doesn't align with your personal or career values. So really doing that look,
Mhm.
Julie, is so important, so that you can kind of figure that out ahead of time before you sign on the dotted line and then you find yourself uncomfortable in that environment.
Yeah.
Mhm. There's there's a whole other part of that conversation that's understanding what your career values are,
Mhm.
right? That might be that might be a whole other, I think that's a whole other webinar, right, to spend on, that process of self inquiry, or the podcast episode that'll be coming out. Little plug there. But that one, we'll get into that there. Now, so we're going through the process. First interview, phone screens, doing your research. Another part that you mentioned was about building that confidence.
Mhm.
Now, outside of doing the research and building the competency aspect of it, how else do you coach folks building up their confidence, decreasing anxiety, like to really step into the first interview to be themselves?
For sure. One of the big reasons why folks may struggle with confidence in the interview process is because sometimes they don't feel like they belong there, right? And they're
Mm,
trying so hard to please the interviewer. And so the first thing I tell any client or anyone who's listening is, take a step back and take inventory of all the things you've done to actually get here. So I recommend that my clients keep a brag sheet, so listing out accomplishments, who did you help, when, what was the value and the outcomes. And it can help for writing resumes, but sometimes it's also for you to just look at it and see that this is me on paper. I have done all this stuff. I'm a badass. Right. And so being able to see that on paper can sometimes just give you a boost as you're starting to prep for that conversation. The other thing that can also help with confidence is for you to know that it's not just about whether or not they like you, it's about whether or not you like them. And so often we try to like I said, please the interviewer. We want to make sure we're saying the right things, asking the right questions. And while that can be a part of it, it's important for you to know that you're also interviewing these individuals when you go and have this conversation. Do you like their environment? Do you like the team setup? Do you like the work that they do when they further explain? And I always say, think of it like a date, right? If you go out on a date, you need to vet whether or not you like that other person. And if not, you say, thanks so much for your time, and you move on. And so thinking of an interview that way, it's like, hey, let's see if I like this environment. And if not, thank you for your time and move on. That helps to take the pressure off of it, because it's not just about, man, I hope I get it. I hope they like me. It's about, hey, if this isn't a fit for me, I'm confident and comfortable with walking away and finding something that's more in alignment.
mm,
I agree that I have something to add, and this is just giving permission to everyone out there to be nervous. And nervousness comes from caring. Like, you're not nervous when you go to the post office. Like, things you don't care about don't make you nervous. Things
Right.
you want badly give you nervousness, because that's because you care. So
mm,
that's an okay, normal feeling. Um, and sometimes I've had people say to me, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. And it's endearing, because I know they're nervous because they're real and they want this and this is important to them. So if you're feeling like you're losing it, it's okay to say to the interviewer, I'm so sorry. I really want this job and it's making me nervous and I'm sorry. Just gather yourself, because people can tell when you're uncomfortable and you're faking it. And I just think authenticity is so important in this whole process, because if you
mm,
show up as a different person than interviewed, that is going to fall apart quickly. So I want to give everybody a little bit of permission to be your real self, be honest, and then you've got somebody rooting for you on the other side, if they know that this is not easy for you. However, if you're going in for a job that's about being a presenter or getting out there and doing sales, you got to have that confidence. So maybe you rethink your line of work if this is really hard for you.
Yeah, no, and I love the idea of truly being authentic, right? So you don't want to show up as a different person in an interview, because we've all, if you've hired anyone, we've seen those tough situations where the person is like, man, they wowed us in the interview, and they get to the desk and you're like, who
Yeah.
was in the interview? Because this is definitely not the same person who's sitting at the desk.
Yeah.
And so to your point, being yourself, being open, that also helps you to build rapport with the interviewer, right? Which may also help to
mhm,
tame some of that nervousness, so you can properly get through the conversation. Because people hire people that they like, or they can actually have a conversation with. And to your point, if you seem like you're a robot
Hmm.
or that you're reading from a cue card, it'll be hard for those interviewers to actually say, okay, was this a real person that I even want to like have lunch with or stand at the water cooler and chat with? And if the answer to that is no, you're less likely to get the opportunity. So I love that, Julie. Being authentic and being yourself is huge.
Okay, so you've gone to the first interview. You've you made it through the phone screen. You presented yourself. You prepared. Now, now it's time for post interview. So, what recommendations do you have for post phone screen? Emails, calls. What do you suggest or recommend?
So from my perspective, when it comes to phone screens, I know that there's some, different perspectives as to whether or not you should say thank you. You don't want to feel like you're begging for the interview, but I just think it's polite. I mean, I do speaking engagements all the time, and I thank them for, hey, thank you so much for having me. It just shows appreciation for the conversation and the opportunity. So I'm old school, and I say, hey, you don't have to make it a long-winded thank you note, right? You can send them a thank you note and just say, thank you for the conversation. I really appreciated your perspective on this and for you sharing some insight about that. And, look forward to hearing from you. And does it make a difference for everybody? Potentially not, but you may stand out when you're able to reach out and say and come back top of mind with something from the conversation.
Mhm.
I would also say if there's an opportunity, if you didn't get anybody on the front end, while you're waiting to hopefully hear back, is there someone else that you can talk to and network with in the interim, who may have some other insights, who can move the conversation along, who can, anything like that. That's another thing that I would say is, can you connect with somebody in the interim while you're waiting to hear back as well?
Mm, right. Great. Okay.
I agree.
So you've taken the time, connected with folks, sent your thank you email, and now I've had some folks go through like 8 round interview processes. Now, I just want to open up the conversation of, typically there's, I'd say, three rounds. Then you kind of go meet the hiring manager. Maybe then there's a panel where you meet a hiring manager and a couple other folks within the division is kind of baseline. But
Mhm.
what do you say? What do you say to those folks that are facing 5 to 8 rounds ahead of them?
So the first thing I'll say is that for any organization that feels that they need 8 rounds of interviews, there's something wrong with your interview process, right? If you can't get the information you need 2 to 3 interviews in, the question is, what's happening in the interviews? What criteria are you using for screening candidates if you need those that many rounds?
Hmm.
But for folks who are in that process, there's nothing wrong with trying to better understand whoever your point of contact is, who may be scheduling or kind of coordinating things for you, to better understand what the actual process is. To say, okay, I've been through about 2 or 3 or 4 rounds of interviews now, would like to better understand, what is the full spectrum of the process, and where do we end up at the end, just so I can better manage my own expectations, manage my time. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have the space to take ownership of this process. You are the CEO of your career. You don't have to
Hmm.
go through 8 rounds of interviews or do the homework that they give you, because I've heard about people having to develop full presentations, develop an app, develop this, all because a company is telling them that, and then they don't get the job and they get to keep their IP, right? And so making sure that you're asking yourself, how much do I want this opportunity? And if this is the process for me to even enter the organization, if I have to jump through this many hoops to get into the organization, what does that mean for my promotions? What does this
Hmm.
mean for my ability to step into leadership? All the things that may be part of your career goals. It's important for you to do that evaluation that, hey, is this a preview of what's yet to come? And is this the right fit for me? So I think that self-reflection and value is a reflection on your values is important, and the alignment, but also just taking ownership and asking questions as to, if you're on interview 4 and you don't see any end in sight, asking questions as to what is the plan? Can you share more about the process? Because I've had these conversations already and just want to better understand.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, I totally agree about the 8 round interview process. but I have seen it there. I've seen a
Oh, yeah.
whole variety of different, where it's a case study, where it's a where it's a team workshop, where it's a panel interview. I mean, there are so many different things that would take more than just one webinar to cover to prepare for.
Yeah.
But let's just okay, phone screen's done. We're stepping into the second interview, likely with a hiring manager,
Mhm.
right? Now, same thing. Preparation before that meeting that's above and beyond maybe what we said for the initial screen. What would you think?
Mhm. Yeah, so one of the big things that I think is important, when even though you may have done this in your phone screen prep, it's more important even in this one to prep for communicating your value effectively. What happens
Mhm.
sometimes in interview conversations is that you could have done a wealth of things. You're awesome, cured cancer, but if you're not able to get that message across, the hiring manager is just going to be looking at you as to, like everyone else. And so, what I tell the clients that I work with is take a step back and think about the question, why should we hire you? And really just take that and put that on a piece of paper, and then really think about a good way to summarize, what's special about you as a candidate. And they may not ask you that question directly to say, well, why should we hire you? Some places may not be that forward, but it helps you to start to think about, what are the things I would say if the question is asked in different ways. Why are you the best fit for this role? What do you think that you bring to this role that's unique? They may ask you different variations of that question. And so being able to effectively communicate your value will set you leaps and bounds apart from other candidates. And it's not just going through a checklist of, I did this and I did that, but it's also about, what skills have you brought to the table? What transformation? What results?
Mhm.
Just beyond going through the checklist. So that's a huge piece of of the preparation process. And then going back to what Julie mentioned around preparing questions. If you don't remember anything else from what the conversation that we've had today, it's about preparing to and having questions ready. The reason for that is that you get more insight and perspective into, what does this company really focus on? What's important to them? And does that align with what's important to me? Whether you're asking about DEI initiatives, sustainability, work from home, work life balance, the culture, how did this job even come to be, or why is it open? Asking those kind of questions, in addition to questions about the industry and the market and so forth, that helps you to better see, okay, is this person giving me just the party line? Or are they really giving me genuine answers? Do I feel like this is an environment that would work for me? Having those kinds of questions for the hiring manager especially is really important.
I also think, as if it is the hiring manager or whomever you're meeting with, find out who they are and do some research on them, because then you can form a bond with that person, because you come in knowing how long they've been there, what role they have, maybe they're on the same path you want. It's your opportunity in all of these interviews to form a relationship. And that, as Julia said,
Mhm.
people want to hire people they have a connection with. If you can take some time in the interview to ask the person, what do you like about working here? What has your story been? How did you get hired? What is your journey? That's going to show that you care about people. You're not just about yourself. And at the end of the day, companies want people that are going to be engaging as a team. So if you can make a connection with the people you're interviewing with, they're going to remember you. They're going to have a little special, like, oh, you know that he likes this sports team. So the next time you see him, how about those Giants? Whatever. So I mean, it's just about, again, being real and forming these relationships and finding any opportunity in the interview process to make connections on a human level with the people you're speaking with. So if you get to know a little bit about them, who knows where that will go.
And I think too that's so important because that's something I share with my clients as well. Going back to the LinkedIn platform, what are people talking about on LinkedIn? What school did they go to? Did you guys go to the same school? Were you in the same sport? Do you know some of the same people? Using those tools that are right at your fingertips to help you build that authentic rapport with your interviewer is a huge step in the right direction. And I'll give you guys a quick story. One of the interviews that I had, uh, me and the interviewer, we realized that we both had sung in choirs, and he was a baritone and I was an alto. And we're going on for like 10 or 15 minutes in this interview about singing. Right. And it has nothing to do with the energy industry or anything like that. But we found a conversation where we had such common ground and we were just gravitating to it. Ultimately, I got the job. And I believe that part of that was really the ability that we had to really build that connection in the interview. And like I said, we're talking about singing in choirs.
Yeah,
Mm,
Julie, and I mean,
so
part of
true.
interview skills is to be good at small talk. Being able to strike up a conversation with anyone from any walk
Yep.
of life and finding a common connection is an art and it takes practice. So, for all of you out there, strike up conversation with strangers. It's a great practice and opportunity. You never know when that conversation is going to lead to your next.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
very true. It just opening yourself up in day to day interactions to, and that brings something else up for me is in those interactions is like a lot of times, I'll speak for myself in my past, like not wanting to portray any type of weakness or a need, right? But it's no one can help. No, your network won't be able to help you find a role or move forward in your career if you don't ask or allow yourself to be seen in the fact that you are looking for another role and bringing that to the forefront of conversation. So I wanted to just build on a little bit what you said, Julie, and then also back to the questions that a candidate can ask. And I find that there are some really nuanced ways to ask these questions to get the hiring manager or interview or whatever interviewer that you're talking to actually give you the truth or
Mhm.
actually catch them in a place where they're really unsure what to say, so it can give you more insight specifically into whether this value aligns. So for example, if you're doing something with, say, the team, like team cohesion, and how and how the organization values that, how collaborative is the team, it's less of asking the interviewer a yes or no question, like, or a little bit generic, like, can you tell me about your team dynamics? No person in that organization is going to say, well, it's just not really it. We don't have one.
Yeah.
Everyone's operating in silos. All right, no one's going to say that. But it could be a question of like, how well do you know the people on your team? Can you give me an example? Or
Mhm.
how well do you know the folks, in the next department? If you're when you become familiar with how the organization is structured, so you can get an actual, like, better idea of how communication flows within the organization. So it's like being a little bit more nuanced with those questions and leaving them open ended, right? Not just asking the interviewer yes or no questions, right?
Yeah,
And I like
fully
that.
agree.
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
No, I was just going to say, I love the fact that you talk about asking it in a very nuanced way to get the answer that you want to get. Sometimes you have to couch the question a little bit differently in order for you to get a real answer versus just what may be on the cue card. So
Hmm.
sometimes, you ask a little bit about whether how can you tell me about how the team is structured and how you work together, how work is divided amongst the team of five that you said that you have. And then they're like, oh, well, we all just do what we have to and we all just roll up our sleeves. And it's like, red flag, right? So you know what I mean? So and again, you didn't ask it in an invasive way, but it's just like, well, can you share a little bit more about how the work is structured and so forth? And they're like, oh no, we're all just doing what we can, doing what we have to. It's like, well, wait, so are roles undefined or people overburdened? You know, it opens up the door and opens up more questions for you to see, hey, is this an environment for me if I'm someone who prefers a more structured or more defined work environment? Or I have, kind of work-life balance requirements that won't allow me to just roll up my sleeves when everybody else is doing it. So to your point, John, really asking the questions in a very nuanced way versus asking yes or no questions can really get you some better quality answers as you make the decision for your career.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing we haven't touched on yet, and that's appearance. And I'm going back to even the phone screen that can be a Zoom screen. It's like, you know how should folks think about even how to appear in person on screen? I know we just completely glazed over it, like, oh, we should all know to show up in a certain way for a role. But what would be your advice on appearance wise, how you want to set yourself up for interviews?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to saying that I'm a bit old school as I think about interviews as dates. When you're going out on a date, you're getting dressed and you're making sure that you're putting your best foot forward. If this is an opportunity that can transform your life and allow you to feel fulfilled in what you do every day, why would you not come in your best? And no one's saying that you're wearing a tux, right? But the idea is that you're wearing the best that you have, or are coming in a presentable fashion, because one, you want them to know that to Julie's point earlier, that you care about this opportunity. So coming dressed well at least highlights that and shows that, hey, I do have interest. This is important to me. I'm going to come and put my best foot forward.
Hmm.
And some interviews may have dress codes and things and so that things that you should align to, but overall, that should be your approach. If you were going out on a date with someone and they showed up in their pajamas, or they showed up in their sweatpants, or what they wore to yoga with John, right? You're like, well, wait a minute. You didn't come prepared for us to go on this date, right? And so that may kind of set a bad tone at the beginning versus you coming and putting your best foot forward.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
And
also
go ahead, Julie.
with
Right.
this virtual world that we're now straddling, my personal opinion is if I see somebody taking an interview from their couch, that reads that you don't have an office. So therefore you don't take your job at home serious. Now, this is my opinion. This is how I read that.
Hmm.
If you're going to be looking at a hybrid job, you better show that you take that seriously and that you have a workspace at home that you're going to take your interview from, that you sit at a desk, you're not just in your kitchen. Be in a space that looks equally professional to sitting in an office. And then also, in regards to how they see you, imagine that you're putting yourself in front of a client in their eyes. Is the client going to be able to see your face? And is it all blown out? Like, show up as if you're presenting what you would be like in front of your best client. So that's, yeah, the sitting on the couch or kitchen table or in
The
your
relaxed, the relaxed in the chair, right?
also when you're ready to have a professional office environment at home, and I know a lot of people that are still pushing for the hybrid or full-time home, that's a big piece of this puzzle, is
Hmm.
convincing them that you work as if you were in an office from your home.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's
I agree.
huge. Yeah, because you don't want to portray that when you're working that you're also multitasking and doing all the things around the house. You're walking the dog, doing laundry, cooking, right? That you want to highlight that you take the work seriously. You're going to commit the time that they ask you to commit on a daily basis, and you can help better present that when you show that, like you said, you have that workspace, you have that place set aside that's
Yep.
dedicated for you to deliver value. So that
Hmm.
fully agree with that for sure.
Hmm. Now, even add just maybe you don't have an office, right? Maybe you are doing this from your apartment, and at least just get behind a neutral wall. Like,
Yeah.
if you're in an apartment, no office space, you likely have pretty neutral walls, right?
Mhm.
So
Or you can get a screen
set yourself
on
up on a
anyone.
chair or something in front of you where
Yeah.
you can at least have a solid background and nothing when it comes to appearance, I always say like nothing to take away from your message.
Yeah.
Right.
So distraction wise, upkeep wise, look wise, it's anything that is taking the interviewer's attention away from your message and who you are, take that away. Clean it up.
Yep.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
I think just one other thing is also, and I know that this seems like something weird, but I've seen it happen to candidates where if you know that you're someone who sweats or something like that, and you're sitting and you know that that may also be a distraction because you've got the beads going, finding yourself in a comfortable environment. So to your point, if you find a neutral wall or a space or an office space, to Julie's point, but making sure that that space is allows you to be comfortable in the interview process, because you don't want to distract yourself where you're just like, I gotta find another napkin, while I'm trying to get through this conversation. And again, it seems trivial to a point, but again, anything that may take away from your message or anything that may make you uncomfortable and not allow you to deliver your best in the interview, you want to try to make sure that you're able to put those things at bay.
Yep.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay. Coming back to a quick, that was a quick detour there. I was like, oh, we got sidetracked. Okay. Coming back to the hiring manager interview. Now you've prepared, you have your questions, you've built up your confidence, you've succeeded in the that round of interview. Now maybe, well, before we get to the third round interview or a potential panel, we'll bring that in where there's multiple parties. What about post hiring manager interview? How does that thank you message change or evolve?
From my perspective, I think you're able to add more specificity as to, especially if it's for the team, you can actually still highlight what you think you'll be able to bring to the team. So you can thank them for for what they were able to share with you, and perhaps you talk about, they're a fellow. I'm from Brooklyn, so I can say that, hey, this person's a fellow Brooklynite, and have that rapport, but also use that as an opportunity for you to share a little bit as to what you're excited to bring to the team, right? So you really want to show that enthusiasm and what you're excited to bring to the team, because again, it helps to keep certain things top of mind. Does that make a difference for every hiring manager? Maybe not, but perhaps for that hiring manager, you saying, because that will help them to reflect on the conversation they had with you, like, oh yeah, she did mention that she did X, Y, and Z, or she did mention that she had this relationship with so and so. And so that's something that they'll be able to share with the next group of folks who will be interviewing you, things to consider, things to evaluate, things to look for, maybe things to get further perspective from you on. So I think that's how you're able to tweak that message a little bit to cater it more to the hiring manager.
Mm,
Yeah, I also think by the third interview is where it shifts to you really drilling down into what this role is and what you're going to be doing, and
Mhm.
having some really good understanding of the expectations of you, the metrics of success, what their review process is, how you're going to know if you're being successful, like
mm-hmm.
getting those good solid questions, because after that third interview you better know if you want this job or not. If you don't want this job, you need to stop right there, because it is
Mhm.
not going to change except waste people's time. So that third interview, in my opinion, is now about the job and the role and the expectations, and how you know if you're going to be successful at this. And so you could even, and I like it when I'm a recruiter and I work very closely to the people I'm courting for a company, and they will send me a list of questions, and I, as the recruiter, will get those questions to the hiring manager or the whatever ahead of time, so that they have an understanding of what this person wants to talk about in that interview. And as you said, Julia, the shift changes into, you start controlling the interview by third or fourth, because they're interested in you. Now you got to be sure you're in alignment. This is what you want. Again, you're not wasting anyone's time, and you have a very clear understanding of the job. And I can't stress that enough. Better know what this role is, because you can understand the company and all the teams, but you got to know what
Mm-hmm.
your the expectations
Abs-
of you are.
Absolutely.
Agreed. And just to touch on that value point a little bit more, we talked about being able to communicate value in that second interview. being able to communicate your value. And one other thing I wanted to add was not just all of the value that you can provide, but what is specifically going to be valuable to this team, like
Right.
in this role. So, as opposed to going through a list of accomplishments or skills, that it's what skills are actually going to apply to the role and being able to communicate those in that second interview. And then I think that's where we're getting into Julie's question in the third interview, to where you're figuring out whether all of the pieces of the role align with your priorities, your non-negotiables as
Yeah.
well, right? So it's really tailoring that value message down to the specific deliverables and expectations within that role.
And can I add something to
Hmm.
that, John?
Hmm.
So when you think about, really targeting the value that you can bring to the table, thinking about someone who may be in a career transition. So for folks that I may be working with in the career transition space, it's important for you to think about how your prior experience will enable you for this role, especially if it's your first one stepping into the new industry. So let's say you're going from sales to project management, for example. How can things in your background really support what's going to happen in this specific project management role? What is the value that you can bring? So for anyone who's listening who may be in the transition space and wondering, well, how do I really communicate my value for this kind of a role? Thinking about how, what are the skills, the transferable skills that you're bringing into this new role, and really tailoring the conversation around that, even if you don't feel like you have the concrete experience. You have plenty of concrete experience in your prior roles.
Hmm.
Julia, I like that because we talk about doing research about the company and being able to know that, but doing research on yourself and being able to
Yeah.
communicate, like you said, I call it an elevator pitch, but practice. This is not something you want to on the spot try and tell your story of why you're great. Like that's something that I encourage people to do in front of a mirror. Time yourself, keep it under 30 seconds, but if you have your closing statement, what is going to seal the deal for your story about why you now after all these interviews believe that this is a right fit? Have that prepared like the back of your hand because you don't want to walk away from that potential last interview going, oh, I wish I would have said this or I forgot that. Know your story, live it,
Hmm.
learn it, and be able to just tell anybody it in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Don't wait until you have an interview to
Yes.
practice.
Yep.
Practice all along so that by the time the interview comes, it's like, okay, I'm ready. You do some refresh, but you're not the night before pulling your hair out like, I gotta research, I gotta practice. Let me say it in the mirror. Let me walk back and forth. Let me say, hello, how are you? My name is trying to do that all the night before. If you practice, to Julie's point, it's something that you live and breathe. By the time you get to that interview conversation, the conversation is just going to flow. It's not going to feel forced or awkward.
And
Hmm.
Julia, John, it's also okay, like when somebody says, introduce yourself, Julie, I could talk for an hour because I do 19 different things, but you got to know your audience. And so
Mm,
knowing what in your story is relevant at this moment to this job, to this person, that's really important. So you don't go off on these tangents of, well, I did this. Like knowing your audience, I think that's key in life. So you don't put people to sleep, but keeping things short and succinct and really pertinent.
absolutely.
Mm, agreed. Now,
Yeah.
taking it one step further. So we've talked about the phone screen, we've talked about the hiring manager. Now moving on to, before we get to a panel, just even if it's different folks within the same day, say you're interviewing with the hiring manager and two other or three other potential hiring managers are within that organization. Now, the thing that I want to bring up, so maybe you've been able to do the research on one person that you're having the interview with, right? Maybe the other folks aren't necessarily associated directly with that role. But I would say first is, understanding how they could potentially tie to the role. How does the parts of the organization work together? If that's something you can't learn beforehand, That could be a question for the interviewer, right? Understanding how those things work together. But one thing before, in addition to the information, is dealing with different personalities,
Mhm.
right? It's like understanding. So, what advice do you have for folks that, you know, coming off the meeting with the hiring manager or coming off their first interview of this panel or of this day? And then how do you reset to get to know your audience once again for the next interviewer? So how do you help your clients, or how would you help listeners today navigate different personalities in interviewers?
Yeah, I think that there is an opportunity. I think depending on the setting as well, right? So first and foremost, if there's the opportunity for you to do some of that research, even if you can't get everybody, maybe there's 5 panelists. If you can get 3, that's still better than nothing. So where you can do some research to understand who you're dealing with. But then also thinking about, if you have the opportunity to do this in person, what conversation can you have with them potentially before the interview? So let's say the interview starts at 9 and you're there early. Are you able to speak to anyone, even if it's not everyone? Is there an opportunity for you to have any sort of preliminary conversation, and then also seeing how, so if you're able to have a conversation with one interviewer, getting a chance to see how the other person responds, what input they provide, even how they're sitting, or their facial expressions begin to give you a sense of, okay, well, how interested is this person? Do they seem like they're fully here? What does their attitude seem to be? And that may give you a sense of even how you can broach the conversation with that individual as well. So you're not going to have a personality test, a Myers-Briggs ahead of time, right? But just at least being able to see, what can I learn about them ahead of time? What can I learn about them even before the conversation? Even if it's virtual, they may say, join at 9:45 or something. We're going to be getting everybody in the room. So, if you can join early, and perhaps someone's sitting there waiting for everyone else to sit up, and you can start to chat. Perhaps you saw they like the Giants. And we go back to Julie's question. How about those Giants, right? So, even if you can't get everyone, trying to build a rapport and trying to understand the personalities and build a conversation with someone ahead of time and understand a little bit more about them will really help you as you navigate through the interview. And also, don't be afraid to ask them to share more about what they do. And as they may ask you to introduce yourself, and then they may go around, and feel free to ask a follow-up to better understand maybe what the work that they do, or a little bit more about their background, because that also can help to provide some insight as well.
Mm.
And I'd like to kind of give a message to hiring managers. This is to you. Let's let's have some grace for these people. If we're going to push them
Mhm.
through, help them out. Give them some heads up on, let me just tell you a little bit about the person you're meeting tomorrow. Here's some insight. This is not supposed to be scary and, aggressively competitive. If you like someone and you're on the hiring manager interviewing side, feed them as much information as you can to help them succeed. I feel that when I've had the most success with hires, when I pour into setting them up for success instead of
Absolutely.
letting it be this like guessing game where they're on pins and needles. I want to
Yep.
fill them up with confidence and just prepare them and tell them things to think about and tell them good questions. Like, we're working together to get the right people hired. And if you're a good hiring manager, you're going to know right away at that screen if this person's worth your time. If they are, give them that info. Let them feel like they've got someone on their team. It's going to make them show up more confident.
And on the other side of that, if you have a contact that you've been working with who's been helping to set things up, don't be afraid to say, can you share a little bit more perspective about the interviewers? Don't be afraid to ask. They may say, well, I don't have them, or I don't really know, maybe they don't have everything, but don't be afraid to ask that question, so that you can also, again, avoid that guessing game. So as much information as you can suss out ahead of time, it makes it so much easier, by the time you get into the interview, at least you get some perspective on their background, perhaps how long they've been with the company, some of their skill set, depending on what the coordinator can provide. Get as much information as you can. Don't be afraid to ask for it. The worst that they can say is no.
Yeah,
Hmm.
agreed. I want to just chime in. I think what's interesting when we talk about the 8-round interviews, from my perspective, because I've seen that happen, I've been involved in that. It's because nobody on the interviewing side is willing to make a decision. And they're all sitting around going, I don't know. What do you think? Well, I don't know. Let's get his opinion. And there's just, so again, companies really need to hone in on who's the decision maker here, who has the final say. How many people are you going to let weigh in on the hiring of an entry level person? It's just crazy sometimes how unconfident people are about making a decision on a hire. And I think so. I want candidates to not feel like it's them as much as it potentially is an internal issue of we need more opinions. And I think more cooks in the kitchen lead to drawn out hiring processes and you lose candidates. But just that's usually the reason why it takes so long.
Mm-hmm. And I think not to vent a little bit, but I think it's also tough when you have that many rounds of interviews and then you're taking forever to get back to the person who's in, about where they landed with the last interview. And so for the hiring managers who may be listening, making sure that you're getting back to these candidates timely, whether they're in other processes or not, it's just courteous to let people know, hey, you're moving forward or you're not moving forward. Don't have people waiting for weeks and weeks for you to say, oh, well, now we need another interview. It's like, well, it's been 4 weeks since the last one. How long is this process going to take in order for me to get hired? So just being considerate of people's time and space. So get them the information as quickly as possible so that everyone can make the right decision.
And Julia, don't you agree? Even if you have no news, that's news.
Yes. No.
We have no news, but you're still on my radar. I'm not blanking you. And I think that right now, everybody in the hiring world needs to be very conscientious of being considered somebody who's blanking them or ghosting. Don't let that be your reputation or your company's reputation. So just stay in touch and just say, we're still in the mix. There's no news. How are you doing? Are you looking at other companies? Because it's important for hiring managers to realize, as you said, these people could be interviewing with 5 other companies. And by the time you're like, you got the job, they're like, sorry, I thought you forgot about me and took another one. Don't let that happen.
Right. Don't ghost people, guys. Don't do it.
Easy not to.
Now, back to the folks that are, dealing or that are within these transitions. Now, you've gone through the panel, you've gone through the hiring interview. Maybe you get the job. Great. I think there's, I think there's another webinar that we can do about, the first 90 days, right? But for now, let's talk about the rejections. So you go through 1, 2, 3 rounds of interviews, you don't get it. Now, how do you help clients like maintain the motivation like to continue the process with the same fervor that they have for the first opportunity or for the previous opportunities?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that front. One, I always tell my clients to feel whatever you're feeling right now, especially if there are people who may have been in the process for a while and it feels like, man, I'm not gaining any traction. I'm not making progress and so feel what you need to feel in that moment. And I also say don't take it personal, but take it personal. It is a business, right? And they may have plenty of candidates that they're interviewing. It doesn't mean that you're not a good candidate or anything like that. It doesn't mean that you're not qualified. You may not have been the right fit. They may have had an internal candidate that they were gearing up for this, and this was all a show by having the job posted and interviewing people. We don't know. But at the same time, taking it personal in the sense that this is an opportunity for you to reflect on your own process. And again, it's not saying that you did anything wrong, but reflecting on, how can I continue to improve in my interviewing skills and taking it as a practice opportunity and a stepping stone to the next one. Because the next interview may be your yes. And so it's taking what you can from the experience, like I said, feeling what you feel, but also thinking about how can I now improve for the next one. And some folks have tried to get feedback from interviewers, and a lot of times they may give you nothing. It's like, oh, the other candidate was more qualified, or we really don't provide feedback. Don't read too much into that, because sometimes, like I said, they may be very vague. So it's really thinking about your own process and using this as the stepping stone to the next opportunity.
Hmm.
I agree 100%. I also think life is long if you're lucky. And if this wasn't the right role for you there, they know you now. And if you did your due diligence and had great interviews and got pushed along because they saw something in you, you never know months down the line, years down the line, where that might come back around. So stay in touch. Hopefully, you made a connection with someone throughout the process that was a true connection, LinkedIn or whatnot. Check in with them every 6 months. If you truly believe this is the company that's right for you, don't give up. It may not have been the right role, but that doesn't mean there won't be a spot for you in the future. And now they know you. You've done your job of all the interviews, so it will make it that much easier. But keep those doors open and don't I want people to know it's really hard for interviewers to have to call and tell someone they didn't get the job. It's
Mhm.
as hard for us as it is to hear it sometimes because we know how much time and energy was put into that. I encourage you to, yes, feel your feelings, but don't make the interviewer that's giving you the news, don't shoot the messenger.
Right.
That's just going to leave like a, oh God, I hope I don't run into them on the street because they hate me now. So just be gracious and leave that positive potential of maybe in the future we'll have another opportunity to connect. That's
Hmm.
beautiful. That shows just that there's a place for you.
And John, if I could add one more thing, just for anyone who's listening who may have gotten rejected from multiple, maybe there was one or multiple. You are not the interview, you are not your job title. You are a person who has value and skills and awesomeness outside of this. So even as you're going through the process, I just want you to not hold or tie your value or your worth or your emotions to this opportunity. It may not even be a no, it may just be a not yet. And so I just want folks to maintain that confidence and that esteem in their career skills, even if they're facing rejection. Because I know sometimes it's hard, and we may beat ourselves up a little bit, but this is not a reflection on you and what you can bring to the table.
Mm. That's
I love that.
that's a perfect place to wrap this up on. Thank you, Julia. Now, before we sign off, what else do you want folks to know about you? How can they connect with you?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me, Julia Rock, and also you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Rock Career. So I would love for you to follow me there. And then you can also visit my website, rockcareer.com, and we can connect there as well. So I try to be consistent on all platforms to make it easier for people to find me.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Consistency is key.
Yes.
All right. Now, thanks everyone so much for joining us for January's webinar. And Julia, thank you so much for
Thank
joining us
you,
today. The
Julia.
conversation was just awesome. Like
Thank
not
you so much.
not one dull moment. Just flow as I expected.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John and Julie, for having me. It's been an amazing experience. Thank you so much.
Of course. And everyone, you can check out what Julie and I have going on at humessence.com. And there's some career transition resources there that are for you for download for free as well. So you can check out the career transition page under the free resources section at humessence.com as well. So you have resources at your fingertips. Take advantage of them, utilize some of these things and get into gear. Make it a consistent practice. Utilize your resources, show up for roles consistently, apply for roles consistently, and your opportunities, the right opportunity for you will show up. So, again, thanks again, Julia. Thanks,
Thank you.
Julie. And we will see everyone next time.